we doing?
Changing the world.
What are we doing?
Changing the world.
They're lying about everything.
Don't Worry Darling is finally here, and we at Backlot Banter are here to give you our thoughts. I'm Tucker Hazel. I've got my darling co-hosts, Abram Biener and Tanner Dykstra, and we are here to tell you what we think of this movie that is absolutely all abuzz across the nation. Worrying is sweeping the nation, boys. We're all worrying here in our seats, but if you want to talk to us about Don't Worry Darling, please join our Discord. This is going to be a great movie to talk about with people in general. And if you want to continue following us on our movie reviewing adventures, you can subscribe to our channel. Like this video, please, because you're going to like this review. I guarantee it's a Backlog Banter guarantee. Abram, Tanner, I'm happy to have you join me. But Tanner, I'm starting with you this time. What did you think of Don't Worry Darling? Olivia Wilde's sophomore feature.
Her sophomore feature, indeed. I'm not going to pin any of the blame of the quality of the film on Olivia Wilde. Well, we'll talk about that in turn. But personally, I think Don't Worry Darling is a film that looks good, and Florence Pugh is good in it. But I think the main problems come down to the script, as we'll talk about in large part, as I'm sure you said when I had my headphones off and I was doing a little Harry Styles dance spin.
I didn't, but you know.
Okay. This is going to be largely a spoiler review because you can't really talk about the meat and bones of Don't Worry Darling without getting into spoilers.
Yeah.
But broadly across the entire scope of the film, I'm going to parrot what I think a lot of critics are saying, that Florence Pugh is good, Chris Pine is good, Harry Styles' performances leave a lot to be desired, quite personally. And I think it looks good. I don't know if that's something that a lot of people are saying, but I think it's a very pretty-looking film.
Okay, sure. I mean, you covered a lot of bases there, and we'll certainly nail them down. We'll nail down those baseboards as we go through this review. But Abram, give me your thoughts on this movie.
I'm about to tell you something, and this sounds like a joke because it's the sort of thing that I say as a joke, but this is a thought that literally went through my head.
Yeah.
There's a dinner table sequence. It comes maybe an hour into the film. It's in the trailers. It's not a spoiler. I literally thought to myself, I wish somebody hit me in the head with a tire iron.
All right.
I think that Don't Worry Darling is an awful movie. Genuinely, I think that the script is terrible. I think that the plot is goofy, and I think that Harry Styles truly gives a Sonic Adventure level performance. And this is a true fact. I was there. We were recording this Thursday night. I was there for a 7:10 p.m. showing, and my theater of people who paid a premium ticket price to be there were consistently laughing at the movie. Consistently.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in the hallway as Jean was going to the bathroom after the movie, and I was hearing some exit poll thoughts as I was there. And people were talking about how...
This is how they do Cinema Score, by the way.
Right.
I think so, yeah.
They're talking about how Harry Styles seemed just to have an awful performance, how it was not good material for him and all this. And I think that he is distractingly poor, and I think that he's how the movie will be remembered. But Tanner, I think you're right. I think the movie is beautiful. I think it might be the best shot of film I've seen this year. I think it really is remarkable, and Florence Pugh is very good. But to me, that does nothing to absolve the script issues, the thematic issues, the narrative issues, Harry Styles' entire being.
Issues.
I think the movie starts in a bad place, but then it veers so far off its own poorly established track that to me there's sort of like a spectacle to it. It's like I'm standing there, it's like I'm in the eye of the storm and I'm seeing it all around me. I'm like, this is just, I can't even believe it.
Tucker Hazel, what did you think?
Thank you for handing it off to me.
Yeah.
Abram, you and I had very different experiences with this film. Not only because our theater was not as loud as it could have been. Let me tell you, I was expecting this to be college-age girls around me just absolutely a titter whenever they saw Harry Styles on screen. But they were quiet. We had basically no out-of-the-ordinary laughs. Of course, there are jokes in this movie, and people were giggling at those, but that didn't happen in our theater. But I love this movie. I think it's great. I think it is missing some parts that would make it an easy top-tier movie for me. As I said, it's not one of the best movies of the year, but I think where it matters, I absolutely think it nails it down. It's not stitched together properly, but everything that exists to be stitched together, I think is done very well. I don't think Harry Styles is terrible. I think it should have been someone else, but he fits the part visually, and he does a fine enough job for someone who is not a professional not an actor. He's not a professional actor, but I would knock it down. He's not an actor.
But don't cast him.
I agree. I'm not saying they should have, but he did not detract from the movie. I was waiting for this moment that everyone was like, "Oh, this is like the worst scene on the planet," and then it would happen. Like, that was fine, whatever. I leaned over to my friend Sam, like, we just saw the worst scene in history of film. But I was like, whatever, yeah, it's okay. But visually, one of my favorite movies visually, I think, almost of all time. I think it's an inspired, creative, visually film. And the editing, I think, is incredibly interesting. It uses a lot of interesting techniques to approach that storytelling. And Florence Pugh gives one of the best performances, not only of her career, but of the year. I really think that she pulled me in. And when we're talking about the tension, about the moment-to-moment story that's going on, of figuring out what's going on, these conflicts in the Victory neighborhood, I think that it all is really interesting and really enrapturing. It just doesn't bring it all home. So for the vast majority of the runtime, I'm like, yeah, I'm fully invested in this. I think it looks great. I'm very interested in what's happening. When I'm leaving the film, I'm like, yeah, it doesn't wrap up in a way that I would like, and it definitely does not hold up to like a scrutinizing eye when you're like, what was this set up for? Did that pay off? No, there are certainly holes, but I think the holes are a lot smaller than you are giving this movie credit for, because I think it's pretty much rock solid across the board, except for those places that I will certainly concede.
Yeah, it's rock solid except for when it's not rock solid.
Exactly. Yes.
Can we do spoilers now? Can we give scores and do
Yes.
spoilers?
Oh, yeah, let's give scores, do spoilers. If you even had a vague recollection that you might want to check out this movie, go check it out. At the very least, you'll have a fine time. You'll be able to weigh in on the discourse, no less. And go support an original film, I guess.
Well, what I've heard is
yes.
that this is very similar to the plot of the Stepford Wives, which is something I have not read or heard. I don't know anything about that, but it's like a loose maybe adaptation or just very heavily inspired, but it is an original film.
Yeah, go check it out.
Yeah,
if you're interested, I'm gonna give this movie a 5.5 out of 10 as of right now. Could go up, could go down, who's to say?
Yeah, I think that you should absolutely not go see this movie in the theaters. Here's the
okay.
thing: support original filmmaking. Go watch The Woman King. It just came out last week.
Yeah, fair point.
That's an amazing movie. You can go check out our review we did it last week.
Uh-huh.
I think that this movie, and I'm going to be really excited to talk about this, but I think that it is a failure. I think the script is a complete failure. I don't think it built any tension for me. I was almost immediately disconnected from the film. And I think that it's the spectacle, as you're saying, Tucker, it is a beautiful movie, and I agree. And I love the sound design. That's something I also want to shout out with the movie. But those are things I think you can appreciate at home. I'm giving this
for sure.
I'm giving this movie a 2.5.
I'm going to be giving it a 7.3. I think this movie is great. Absolutely see it in the theater. It's something that does pay off seeing with an audience, especially if your audience is full of, as it was for us, people who are very excited to be seeing Harry Styles, to be experiencing a movie on the big screen, like with their friends. We had a bunch of our friends, and it was absolutely the best way to see it.
I will say, to be fair, this is a movie like a movie, and it's the kind of movie you go see in the theater. So you should see the movie
like
in the theater.
Real see it in the theater movie.
Yeah,
take Harry Styles' word for it, not ours. Because what do we know? We're not international pop superstars.
We're not in major Warner Brothers feature films.
No, we are not.
I was trying to do a Chris Pine there. Sorry.
Oh, I see. I see what you're doing. But regardless, that means that we are in spoiler territory officially. So you have been warned.
That's the spoiler flash.
There are dangerous materials from here on out, folks. So steer clear.
Progressive materials.
Dangerous progressive materials, to be sure. So, fellas, where do we want to go from here? Because there's a lot to talk about.
I actually kind of want Abram to guide us through this review, because he's obviously the most passionate one here.
Yeah, I just think the movie sucks. I'm only passionate insofar as that I saw it 90 minutes ago.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to forget about it because I think that it's a film whose concept doesn't match the execution. There's a couple pivotal moments I think we should talk about.
Okay.
Obviously, the sort of unraveling of what's actually going on.
Yeah.
But I want to go to the beginning first. I think the film opens in quite an interesting way. Yeah. And I don't just mean it's very opening. I mean sort of those first few minutes. The reason that I was basically immediately disconnected from Don't Worry, Darling is because the film immediately puts you in a position where it tells you that things are not good.
Yeah.
When I think about a sort of film like this, what I expect, or at least what I want as a viewer, is I want to spend that first act living in Victory, and I want to come to know the characters and come to know why people want to live in this place, right?
Yeah.
But I think this film makes a critical error in this first couple minutes, wherein we basically see Margaret holding that red plane a couple minutes into the film, and immediately the editing and the sound and everything goes spooky for a moment.
Yeah.
And then we see Florence Pugh crack the eggs, and there's nothing in the eggs.
That happens 10 minutes in, by the way.
Okay.
10 minutes into the movie is when she cracks the eggs and there's nothing inside.
And my problem with that is that immediately I'm like, okay, I'm out. I don't care, because everything here is a veneer. It's a facade. There is no sense that there is a believable world that I'm being ripped out of.
Yeah.
There was just immediately a sort of facsimile of 1950s like traditional family structure that's immediately shattered. And to me, that's very dissatisfying, to where I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I don't care. We spent no time to set up who Frank is, what the relationship between Jack and Alice really is, because they love each other, but I don't know. We got Bunny, and we got X and Margaret and Y and Z and everybody, but immediately it's like everything's fucked up. And I just find that to be very dissatisfying.
No, you're absolutely right. It feels like there's 10 minutes, 15 minutes that are just not in the film. Like, the cutting room floor, they're like, whatever, we don't need this. We don't need that. We don't need this setup. We don't need to be introduced to this. And I do think that is an error of this film. I think it absolutely would be a lot more investing and endearing and interesting in terms of how it's paced. I think that's the problem here is the pacing that they, for some reason, just decided to not include. I do think that it's not, for me, it's not an end of the world thing. I'm like, yeah, it should have had that. It would have been better if it had that. But being able to be set off on the wrong foot to where, ooh, okay, I'm already feeling unease. And being able to really be in the mind of Florence Pugh's character, Alice, for the entire runtime of the film in that sense of unease from the very beginning, I think is an interesting creative choice. I think that keeping me in that unease for a lot of the film led to it maybe feeling a little bit repetitive. It's like, okay, we kind of already got this already, but I don't think it ruins the film. It certainly didn't ruin it to the degree that it did for me.
Yeah, I would agree with probably closer to Abram. I mean, as you said,
usual,
you know,
you land somewhere in the middle.
As usual, I land somewhere in the middle because, as we said, you know, the egg cracking thing happens 10 minutes in the movie, and you are immediately on the foot of like, Alice knows something is up, the audience knows something is up. Of course, if you watch the trailers, you know something is up, but you want to be ingratiated into the mind of the character, the world of the film a little bit more. So you're immediately on this foot, and it has that pacing of a film that's like 90 minutes long. But this is a 2-hour-long film, and I find that to be a bit of an issue. As you said, Tucker, it can get repetitive. It can get, you know, it feels like a bit drawn out in places, especially. And in that 15 minutes that are missing, I feel like you could plug a few glaring holes in the script here. The ones that I caught especially are when Alice is putting things together, she just throws out things that are A, either not established, or B, not well established in the text of the film. Those being the fact that, you know, she knows that everyone has like the same meet cute story. Like this is apparently something that was discussed outside of the events of the film that we saw, and this was something that she put together and what grew suspicious of outside of the film that we saw. Yeah. It is there's a line from Chris Pine in the dinner scene that Abram was talking about where he says, "I trusted you in my bedroom," and I think there are ways that you can interpret this. I think from the text of the film, the most accurate explanation is that he's talking about the moment when he saw Jack and Alice having sex in his bedroom, I presume. But it was kind of said with this veneer of, and Harry Styles' character Jack reacts as if Alice and Chris Pine's character had an affair at some point that we didn't see. So that was just a bit confusing for me. But yeah, I think the script does have a few glaring issues like that, plot holes like that, and I'm sure Abram would like to talk about a few overarching issues that he thinks it has as well.
Here's my thing: I don't like to be plot hole Andy about. I'm not gonna be cinema things ding here throughout the review because I don't. That's not important to me usually, but I do think that the plot is so fundamentally flawed, and that dinner scene is a really great example of it. And Tanner, I think you're totally right in diagnosing some of those issues, but I think that the larger problem here is that these characters feel so thin to me, especially Frank. We get so little of Frank. Is that
Chris Pine's character?
Yes.
Okay.
That he becomes like this amorphous thematic stand-in, but not really a fleshed out character to me, because we get him monologuing at the beginning, which sort of establishes the tenor of sort of his cult-like persona. And then we see him in the dinner sequence where immediately in the kitchen is established this relationship, this adversarial like cat and mouse, like weird playing relationship between him and Alice, which I think is really interesting. When you see it unfold at the dinner table through like future exposition about things that the audience doesn't understand, that's like thrown out and taken, as you're saying, Tanner, at face value. But then the relationship between Frank and Alice disappears.
Yeah.
And we see Frank again only for him to get stabbed.
Yeah,
And
in a confusing sequence wherein his wife, Gemma Chan, she stabs him.
right.
That's the name of the character.
Yeah, I don't know what her character's name
Neither
is.
do I.
I'm sorry. She stabs him. It's unclear if she knew what the jig of the whole VR metaverse trad wife simulation was,
Right.
and she says, "It's my turn now." What does that mean? Doesn't matter. We never see her again.
And this is my problem. It is a film that has so much to say and so many characters, but it doesn't take the time for any of them. It's an issue of time because it is 2 hours. You have a lot of material there. You've got a lot of time,
Mhm.
but it feels like we're hitting. It almost feels like Batman versus Superman. Wherein Zack Snyder was told, and I hate to bring up DC here, but he was told by a studio, Warner Brothers, actually, your movie's too long. You're cutting shit out. And the result of that film was a movie that you needed so much projection and inference from the audience to understand what was happening, to buy in, that when that 3 hour cut of the film came out, it was a lot more understandable. And if Olivia Wilde were to add 30, 40 minutes into the movie, I think we could take time to tease out the name of Frank's wife and what Frank's role in the world is and what sort of the town of Victory is actually doing and how these people all interact. But I just don't feel like we spend enough time to understand that.
I agree. As you can see quickly, Tucker has broken out of his simulation, has joined me here in the real world.
Yeah.
I believe he has a rebuttal to Abram's point.
Well, I don't necessarily have a rebuttal because
okay.
I do think that he's right. I mean, a lot of these characters do feel rather flat, and there certainly are a lot of things that aren't fully explained. Both of the plot holes that you mentioned, Tanner, I think can be explained from what is in the film. I do think he was referring to what he saw in the bedroom, the two of them having sex, and it was established earlier on that there are these patterns being formed of they all go to the same honeymoon spot and stuff like that. So from what we see in the film, I think it is set up enough. It isn't established as clearly as it should be.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely do agree. But I think where I read the film a little bit differently and why I don't have as big of problems with the script as you're saying is I read a lot of this film and the simplicity and unease of its writing more through the eyes of Alice coming to terms with the fact that the world around her that she knows is not quite real in the way of these are, as we know from the meta story of the film, these are people in a VR space. It is intended to be like sort of dumbed down. Only some people really know what's going on. Frank is very detached from everything else, which I think is intentional in the world of the film. And so having the characters be rather one-dimensional, I don't think is necessarily a problem because where it counts in Alice, I think she's a very well realized character because of Florence Pugh's portrayal and the amount of time that we spend with her and seeing it through her eyes in that way and sort of the repetition of the world and the routineness and the simplicity of everything. I think the script does facilitate that unease. So even though it would absolutely be stronger if things were better established, if we did understand these characters a little better, I would not complain if those things were added. But I don't think that the film actually loses much of its tension or my engagement in it because I'm invested through the eyes of Alice and through being invested in her unease and her coming to terms with her reality. So I don't really care too much about the other characters and the fact that they are poorly written. It's not a huge detriment to the film to me because I'm looking at it for Alice pretty much explicitly.
Yeah. I think what I would have liked a little bit more about this film, if this film offered it up to me, I would heartily take part in it, is a detective Alice story.
Sure.
Is her more actively piecing things together, because we are led to believe that she is doing that. We just aren't seeing it happen in real time, because a lot of this film's time is spent with these sort of dreamlike sequences of Alice, of course being like you see a lot of these in the trailer too. I think they give a lot of these away, unfortunately, of her like being crushed against the window or the bathtub thing,
Or
the
the
mirror
cellophane.
thing, the
Mhm.
cellophane, of course,
The
is
empty eggs.
the empty eggs. We spend a lot of time on these sort of things, and not a lot of time on Alice like thinking about it or trying to like or talking to people or piecing things together and things like that. And I just wish that I think that also would have helped, make the movie feel like it was moving at a bit more of a clip.
Yes, I absolutely do. I do agree with that, though.
Yeah.
I will say that I think that's where the best parts of the film are,
Mm.
and why it's not a problem that they aren't necessarily substantiated with the larger plot. Is I'm in it for those interesting visuals. I'm in it for her being like, "What the fuck is going on?" and experiencing these dreamlike things, and the idea of this isolation where she can't really talk to other people about this because they're all pushing her away and everyone's denying it. Like, I feel like these are intentional choices that could have easily been improved if that wasn't the choice that they were making. But I do think, again, this was a very specific choice. She's isolated, she's experiencing these things, and we're watching her piece it together. She knows the plane is there. She saw the little Legion of Doom tower off in the distance. It really reminded me of the Legion of Doom thing. I'll put an image of that in the video. But those are the best parts of the movie, and frankly, it's most of the movie, which is why I think I'm enjoying it so much moment to moment.
Sure.
I think my thing about it is that the "Don't Worry, Darling" moving wallpaper is as rich in its storytelling as the film is. Because Tucker, I certainly don't take away that the sort of unsettling nature of a lot of the sequences are when the
Yeah.
film is at its most interesting. But to me, I can be unsettled by a clip of by a bunch of shit clipped together, right? To me, my issue is about how it comes together as a story.
Yeah.
And the reason that I disagree with you a little bit on the importance of the characters is that this is a story about characters as we come to learn as the film, it feels like it's tripping over its own feet to tell you what's happening and then to wrap up the movie.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because when we realize that that Harry Styles
is
is
a Discord mod.
yeah, he's a Jordan Peterson fan.
Uh-huh.
He likes the IDW and he listens to a lot of podcasts, right? Suddenly, in the space of a couple minutes, we have to set up this whole new character dynamic, and we have to set up this whole notion that victory exists for people who are disquieted in their own life to find a respite. So
Yeah.
all of a sudden, the film doesn't it makes itself not about as what I thought it was initially, sort of like this notion of like a faceless patriarchal structure oppressing Alice. It becomes about people turning to these vices, these awful vices, to find some sort of fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
But that requires characters. And the reason that I think this is the reading that the film wants you to take is we learn that Bunny knows what's going on,
Mhm.
but stays here only for her kids, even though the implication being maybe she lost her kids in a miscarriage or something in the real world, so she stays here. That's something we need to tease out of characters. Why do they want to be here? What do they mean when they say this world is ours?
Yeah.
Well, because the other world isn't theirs. Well, they have to interface with that world because they have to go work there 16 hours a day to be back here. But Bunny wants to be here with her kids. But Bunny spends the entire movie basically fucking off her kids and giving them to Alice.
Yeah, it's explicitly stated that they
Right.
like Alice more than her. Yeah.
And it just becomes so messy in the fact that the film in its last like 25 minutes wants to be about people and escapism and everything, but none of that's set up. And then it becomes, and this is where the plot holes become an issue for me, contradictory to what the film itself says in the case of Bunny, or in this notion that Harry Styles' character is this deadbeat in real life who does nothing to provide, and then somehow by who cares, who knows how, gets the victory gear and then is working 16 hours a day to support his girlfriend. It doesn't make any sense. And I think that's where it doesn't only hold up to interrogation in retrospect. I feel like it doesn't hold up to its own logic as the film is racing towards that snap conclusion.
Yeah, it certainly does end very abruptly, and I think that we've actually watched quite a few films this year, where I'm
Me too.
enjoying it.
Oh, nice.
Where I feel like the journey is very, very satisfying. I'm very interested, and then it ends in a weird place. And I think I've come to appreciate a lot more films that end in a place that maybe I'm not completely on board with, or they don't end satisfyingly. But I'm more lenient towards films that I'm enjoying in the moment, and I think offer a lot to drink in while you're watching the film. And looking back on it, what I'm going to remember are those moments. And I do disagree with you a little bit on some of these things that you consider to be plot holes. I don't think it's necessarily that important that he works during the day to support her at night, because fine, yeah, sure, that happens. Like, he gets a job like that. I feel like that being implied is fine. And the I don't think it's necessarily counterintuitive to Bunny's character that she is in it to have the kids but doesn't spend time with them, because I think that's just an interesting like two sides of a coin within one character. Is she's in this for her kids, but she's not spending time with them. It's like, oh, that, I think that makes that actually more interesting for her character. Of course, that's not necessarily a huge focus of the film, but that's elements of this character that I do find interesting. And I think that doesn't necessarily apply to all the characters, because most of them don't have that sort of element to them. But I think I'm so compelled by the ensemble cast, because I think they're all played very well in terms of this sort of like stone cold, like not really unsure what's going on, or too happy in certain scenarios. Like I'm enjoying the cast so much and their performances, that the fact that they are rather one note I see as sort of just an intentional creative decision for the film.
I just think that it gets goofy, and sorry for cutting you off, Tanner, but it's like the film becomes so plot focused in the end that when it tells me things like all of a sudden the men are going to work, but the men to go to work in the real world, and Bunny or maybe not, it's like it becomes so unclear who people are, why they're doing anything, that it just feels like they blew the barn doors off the whole thing.
Yeah.
And you're just like sifting through the rubble to try to figure out, okay, and like trying to jam shit together. And that's my problem with it. I like what you're saying with these notions, that it's an interesting character idea that she's here for her kids, but her kids don't really care about her. But it's entirely projection, and it goes back to my point from before.
Well, I mostly meant that she doesn't actually care about
no,
her.
sure,
She has
sure.
the veneer of caring about her kids. She's in this, but I like to like. Okay, this is definitely a projection, but I'm in the mind of this character, this woman that lost her kids and has the opportunity to get them back. But even if she had kids and they were growing up, I believe she's the kind of person that wants to have kids, but would just be sitting on the lawn drinking margaritas and fucking off her kids. Like I think that that's an interesting character concept.
It's interesting, but it's like it's not in the movie, and not that you're wrong, but it's that the scenes we see set up a character who doesn't give a fuck about her kids, and then the reveal is supposed to be not only does she understand the entire world,
Yeah.
But she's here for something that the film explicitly tells her that she's not interested in. And because that's where then she disappears from the narrative, there's no time to, what does that mean? Is they saying that people are not concerned with family? What the film just becomes like, here's a bunch of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's just so dissatisfying.
Yeah, I think this sort of ties into an issue that I have with the twist of the film. That instead, because for a long time I was saying, while this film was coming out, trailers, whatever, I was saying, all right, this film is either one of two things. It's either Stepford Wives or it's The Village. And it's closer to Stepford Wives, as Tucker astutely points it out. But I think I would have preferred it to, even though if it might have been predictable, I think if it were well done, to have been like a community that exists in the real world for X, Y, or Z reason.
Yeah.
I feel like making it a sort of like VR metaverse thing sort of takes a bit of the punch out of it, I think. Just because I don't know, I don't even know if I can really put a explanation behind it, but like it takes a bit it just takes a bit of like the weight, the punch out of like the things that these guys are doing. And maybe it ties into Abrams' point about, it makes it more about the characters and not about this nameless, faceless societal presence of a patriarchy that is stepping on the necks of these women and using them for their own, personal gratification.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Tanner, what I'd say to that point is, and Tucker made a joke about this in his funny Letterboxd review of like, it's trad wife horror.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting is that there is this weird, like, far right-wing conservative traditional values movement on TikTok and places, right?
Yes.
And like that is an interesting and topical thing to address. But I think the problem with the film is that it seems like it is a deconstruction of like this 1950s sense of America and consumerism and culture,
Yeah.
and this drink to excess and buy the nice shit, and I would kill myself if we couldn't live here in this amazing place, right? But that is an idea about class or about gender and everything. But then it gets flipped on its head to be about maybe something completely different. And maybe you can read it as a continuity, but sort of similar to the problem I had with Us, Jordan Peele's film from a couple of years ago, is it felt more like a thematic change to where now we need to be talking about the role of technology and we need to be figuring out what does it mean to live in a virtual world. But these are ideas that don't feel like they really get played out. So it feels like for me, the film has no clear message. It has a bunch of thematic ideas, but I don't know what it's trying to say. And I just feel myself getting lost in suddenly the practicality of what could have been a simple allegory becoming now there's this sort of dual world situation where Florence Pugh in real life is Ivy chained to a bed and Harry Styles is this loser. Like there is so much there that is important, but is dealt with in maybe 5 minutes of footage.
Yeah.
And that's where it feels like to me, Tanner, it's this shift and this contradiction and this overcomplication of what could have been a simple, but to your point, well executed allegory for class or for gender or for gender roles or hierarchies or things like that.
Yeah, I think it falls into a common, mystery suspense, high concept trope or failure, pitfall, that is, it is far more concerned with the, oh my god, that's the twist.
Oh my
Right.
god, Harry Styles is actually ugly.
Harry Styles ugly and not British. That it's far more concerned with getting you with its twist
Yeah.
than making that twist make sense within the world of the movie, within the script, within the themes, within the all these things. And that's that's something that people often levy at like a Shyamalan movie, and some of his movies do fall victim to that, I think. But I think it's a prevalent issue in this film as well.
Yeah, I think I enjoy the twist a lot more than you guys because I do think it does harmonize in a small way, not in an ultimate okay, oh yeah, this really ties it together way, but in a way of I do think that there is this interesting parallel of and the idea of a modern concept of the escapism into VR that we don't really see that much. Maybe Ready Player One, though that movie was ass.
Even worse than this one.
Yeah.
Thank you. You know what?
Uh-huh.
You and I can agree on that. Let's shake hands.
There you go.
This idea that we did expect it to be this real life thing, and I think I'd rather have them attempt something like saying, "Hey, this is a real world thing of men who feel like they have been disillusioned by the uprising of feminism and the fact that their wives are taking over for them and being the breadwinners, and they want to escape back to this 50s modernity where the men are the breadwinners and the women are just there to take care of them." Like those two do harmonize. The idea of escapism to this ideal world, I think, is what I was hoping for out of this film. And I do think that the twist is unique enough and interesting enough and does support it enough to where it certainly doesn't detract from the film. I was hoping for more at the end to explain the guy who created this and learn a little more about Frank and learn a little bit more about Jack's life as he does have to work and how she's reacting to this as she leaves. And that, again, plays into the fact that I don't think this movie ends in the right place. But I don't think that the problem is the twist, because I think it does synergize better with the themes and the concepts that this film is playing with than you guys are letting on, in my opinion.
Tucker, you bring up a couple things there, and it sort of gets into something that I think because we need to wrap this up at some point.
48-hour review.
I don't think this film goes quote unquote hard enough in the paint with its politics, the politics that it is espousing or by proxy sort of denigrating.
Mm-hmm.
Though those politics of the modern far right traditional 1950s movement, the anti-feminist movement, as you brought up, Tucker, the Andrew Tate-isms, I guess, because we are led.
This is a movie that really shits on Andrew Tate fans.
The glimpses that we get into the actual lore of the film, if you want to call it that, is Frank has a podcast, or he's basically like, I know that you're I'm going to use like Andrew Tate words here. I know that you're a high value male and yada, 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 and you need to the world doesn't see your true potential, but I do. And that is a line that is that Harry Styles listens to in passing. Discord mod Harry Styles, to be clear. And I don't feel like the characters, when the film has the opportunity to say those things, to sort of lay out where its themes are, where its politics are, it does them in sort of vagaries. It's like it's Chris Pine saying like, we're the future and we're doing
world is
good
ours.
things, the world is ours, blah 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 blah. These things that happen because they're like, oh, you want to know what he's talking about, don't you? You want to know what the real twist is. But we're gonna have our characters talking these vague statements that you don't really know what he's talking
sure.
about. And I also, yeah.
I think that I think that they don't do a good job illustrating how terrible this period in this family unit construction was for women during that time period of the 1950s. And I think that's part of the problem. So much of the film is like it's idealized for the men and the women, and Alice needs to shut the fuck up. You know what I mean? It's like the world is constructed in a way, to your point, Tanner, where I feel like it doesn't do enough to illustrate this is the flawed premise. And it becomes more about the flawed premise as the fact that we're in the metaverse. And that's kind of my problem with it. And
Well,
and
I
then
don't necessarily think I agree with that because
okay.
the tension of the film is the fact that she's fighting back against this, that she doesn't quite feel comfortable here. She has these moments of happiness, but realizes that they're fleeting when people don't listen to her, when she pushes back against her husband, and she's constantly being silenced even by her friends. And I think that the women around her are an extension of this system that was not good for any of them, but is her pushing back against it that is us realizing that it's a problem. Like, that is the exploration of why this system isn't great for anyone involved, and that's the entire movie, is her feeling like she's trapped in this situation and she's trying to push back, and everyone's like, no, you must be crazy. Like, that's the whole film, is her pushing back against that.
I mean, to an extent, but there's only two characters that feel that way, really. It's her and Margaret, and everybody else is
Yeah.
happy with it. And even Bugsy or Bab Rabbit, whatever
Bunny?
her name, Bunny says that she wants to be here, right? And it just gets to a muddy place, I think. And it goes back to, I don't think the film is saying the wrong thing, but it's there's too many moving pieces here. And because even extrapolate out what happens 5 minutes after the movie ends. She wakes up and she's chained to the bed with an IV in her arm, and her life is ruined, and Harry Styles is dead in bed next to her. It's like, what's the point? It's better now. It's what? And this is just, I think it's a problem. I think the film, I think you can say the right thing and still not say it clearly enough. And I think that's part of the problem with the film on a thematic level.
Yeah.
Should we talk about Harry Styles in specifics?
Yes.
Just briefly before we wrap up.
I think we should talk about three things in specific.
Okay.
Harry Styles,
good
Florence
Lord.
Pugh, and the visuals, because I think those are the three biggest things about this film.
All right.
frankly.
Okay. Here we go. Harry
It can be a long one, Tanner. Take a deep breath.
All right. Settle in. Harry Styles is, I don't know what I want to say about Harry Styles. He's fine in most things, but I think my thesis statement on Harry Styles in this movie is, when he has to be a silly, goofy guy who's bringing out some of the comedy that is inherent in this script, in this film, he does a good job. Like when he's biting on that carrot, when he's trying to mash those potatoes that aren't boiled or whatever, we're having a good time. Audience is having a good time. I'm in for it. But when he's got to turn it on and he's got to yell and scream about, I gave you this life, Alice. I gave you this life. It's something to be, he leaves something to be desired, I will say, to put it nicely.
I think that he's terrible. I don't think he's always terrible, but I think he's bad when he needs to be good, is what I will say. I think he's really good in the low stakes moments. Because Harry Styles is a very charismatic guy in real life.
Yeah.
And so he pulls off those scenes, and he pulls off the big ridiculous dance number.
Yeah, that's fun.
Which is a really weird sequence of the movie, but
yeah.
The editing of that fucked me up. I don't know what the hell was going on there.
The editing in that
Sergei
scene,
Eisenstein just like, oh yeah, you know,
it's not good in my
juxtaposing
opinion.
two opposing ideas, you know.
And completely cutting out the sound and switching the sound palette entirely, but it doesn't matter. The point is, I think Harry Styles, when he needs to be big, he sounds like he's in the Xenoblade dub, which makes sense to Tucker and maybe Tanner if he's unfortunately had to hear Xenoblade Chronicles 2 in the background. But what I mean by that is both like, because I would love to disparage JRPGs whenever I have the opportunity. But what I mean in larger part is that in voice acting and stage acting and things, you need to be big and loud and project, and everything has to be at 5,000,000% to get the point across, right? And it feels like Harry is overacting to the point of exhaustion. And I think that that's really bad because Florence Pugh gives such an amazing performance. And the reason that my audience was laughing so much, I think, is because he stands out in contrast to the talent of the people around him.
Basically everyone else.
Yeah.
And so that's why I get frustrated. Yeah, I get that he's a big name and I get that he's trying to start a career, but he was not the right person for the role. And I think about like the scene where he's yelling fuck in the car and shaking the steering wheel. He goes from being able to have no nuance in his face to just yelling at the top of his lungs and shaking the wheel. And there is no degree of reality there. And this is a film that wants to have its own sense of reality, and Harry Styles has none of it.
The nuancelessness of his facial expressions is something that really stuck out to me, especially because Florence Pugh is so fantastic.
She's amazing
with these slight facial expressions. Everyone makes fun of like the Florence Pugh pout and stuff like that, but that's only one little tool on her tool belt of like these minor expressions that she can make that mean magnitudes. And when you're comparing that with Harry Styles, I was watching his face in this movie. It's like his face just isn't changing while he's receiving these copious amounts of information, while his entire life, his entire plan is unraveling before him. He's either nothing or he's screaming fuck and drooling and crying and everything.
Yeah. No, there are certainly some comedic moments there, and you're like, man, this should be a powerful moment. I mean, the idea of this guy who has lost his wife or let his wife go and being taken by guys in red jumpsuits that are going to go shock her brain to death, and he's like letting out his anger in the car, that should be a really powerful moment. And some of those other moments where the script and Harry Styles is being loud, but the emotion on his face and the line delivery, especially like the cadence of his delivery, I think is where it really falls apart. It's like he's like 65% of the way there. It's like, you've got the loudness, you've got the lines, but you're not nailing it home. And it's like, okay, I'm not feeling the emotion. And I think the reason that it doesn't destroy the movie for me, I do think it's the element of this movie, frankly, is that Harry Styles is in it and he's not very good. But the reason it doesn't kill the movie for me is I do think Tanner's right. He's charismatic. He's visually the part. In that business suit, as the charming guy who's opening the door for his wife and coming home and putting on the record, he's visually perfect. And I think in those moments,
he is.
He gets people in the theater because he's a good trailer actor in that sense. Yeah, he's like when you like exactly the shot you said, Tucker. When he's got the sunglasses on and that sleek blue suit, and he opens the door and he grabs the glass of scotch out of his wife's hand and sets down the briefcase. You're like, that is a 1950s businessman right there with a British accent.
Exactly, but I do think that he's good in those moments, and those are most of the moments he is in the film, which is why I think it doesn't kill it. And the moments that he's with Florence Pugh, I'm not looking at him. I'm looking at Florence Pugh, who's doing a great job. So it doesn't take me completely out of those moments, though. Of course, I really wish it was someone with better acting chops, because those moments really should hit, but they don't. Though again, it's Florence Pugh that I'm paying attention to, and I think that she's the reason to see this film. I mean, she was great in Midsummer. She's funny in Black Widow. She's good in Little Women. Like, she's an up-and-coming actress, and I think this is her best performance, frankly. I mean, the movie is about her. It is those reactions of her figuring out what's going on. It's her seeing the plane, this guy looking out the window and be like, "What the heck's going on? You're fucked up and run like just exhausted." You know what I'm saying?
But Tucker, I think you're right. If not, I don't know if I think this is our best performance tonight. I probably need to think on that a little bit more. It certainly is her showiest performance.
Yeah.
It is the performance where she is on screen for a majority of the runtime of this film. She gets to go through a slurry of emotions, and she nails each one of them. And she has her big acting moments, her Oscar reel moments. This isn't going to get nominated for any Oscars. Her Oscar reel moments. She has the moments where she can be restrained with just the facial expressions. It is a tour de force for Florence Pugh.
Yeah. And she's also great in the happy moments.
Yeah.
Like when she's polishing the windows and making the food. Like another thing about this film visually, I certainly want to get to the visuals, is the way that this film plays with repetition and close-up shots and things, and really HD shots of food and of mirrors and of objects. It plays in this like really hyper real, like I took a photo of this and I wanted it to look good.
Like a real movie.
Like a real movie on the screen, on the big screen. I think that she works very well in a synergy with that. That is part of why the visuals of this film are as fantastic as they are. And I think it's the visual concept of this film, along with Florence Pugh, that completely sells the movie for me. And I want to hand it off to you, even talk a little bit about the visuals, but come back to me.
Or Florence Pugh. He hasn't gotten to say anything about Florence Pugh.
The last thing I want to say, because I feel like I didn't articulate it, but you're saying it, I think, now. What I mean, and I don't want to reopen the whole thematic conversation, but I want to just get my thought out there, is what I mean when I said that it didn't feel like the film was properly like addressing the culture, is because it felt the film was primarily concerned with sort of her own psychosis and her seeing shit that wasn't there, opposed to sort of her seeing things actually wrong with the society.
Sure. Yeah.
It was more like there's a fucking plane and who knows where it went, right? But
who knows what the plane is? Who's to say?
Yeah, but that's a sidebar. Florence Pugh, yeah, she's great. I don't need to rehash what you guys said. She's great. As for the visuals, yeah, I mean the film is stunningly shot. I mean it's stunningly shot. I think that your idea, Tucker, of the visual inspiration is 100% correct here, because it just the irregularity of some of the hyper closes of the bacon and the eggs, or cutting to those beautiful shots from above of all of the dancers in grayscale flipping their legs back and forth, and how that ends up sequencing with the editing through this transition, literal iris transitions into the iris and everything, like it's all really effective. And the visual language of the film is actually, the film is better if you can't hear it.
Sure.
Or if you can't hear the dialogue track.
Thinking,
but the sound design's so great.
Yeah, it did cross my mind that like I could put this movie on mute and just be like, man, the way that the sunlight is used in this movie, the way that the color palette with these whites and these blues and these yellows and these browns and stuff like that, it's all great.
Yeah, it's the color is wonderful. The composition, it's all really great. And I suppose what I mean more is I want to turn off the dialogue, not the sound design. So the last point I would want to raise, Tucker, thank you for reminding me of it, is that I think that the score is really awesome. It's a little bit of this sort of horror staccato stuff that was sort of coming.
They took inspiration from that Midsummer scene that Florence Pugh is in, of course, and then they just made that the whole score of the film.
Yeah, I mean it's
you haven't seen Midsummer.
No, I haven't. But but I think that this is a soundscape that's become ubiquitous sort of for like modern horror. But I don't think that's a problem, because I think that it sounds really great and it does accentuate the visuals. Like you're really not going to scare me by showing somebody slit their throat. No. In my old age of 21. But the movie's not
about that. It's about the tension in the sound design of smaller, weirder moments. It's the
that's what I mean.
Really over the top cracking of the egg sound that's like grinding into your ears. It's the scrape of the butter against the toast that's like, and you're like,
yeah, it's not the fact that
I want to see the Foley process for this movie.
I want toast is what I was thinking.
It's not that Margaret's throat gets cut. It's that the sound design that's there and the way that it's edited as you kind of see her fall and get up, and the guy and the fucking moving guys show up and everything. Like that is all great. I think the sound in this movie is fantastic. So
and the last thing I do want to say about the visuals, and I think why it sells itself so well, is not only because it's using color well and because it's very well framed. There's lots of interesting framing choices and things from above and hyper close-ups, as we were saying, but is that it has a sense of place unlike anything I've really seen in film. Is I am convinced, like it is so convincing that they built a town out in the desert there, and those are real mountains in the backgrounds. This is a full neighborhood with houses that are next to each other, and I can't tell how much of it is set and how much of it is CGI or matte backdrops or things that are composited in. It is such a place. And they don't just stay in one place. They go to the dance studio. They go to this pool. They go to multiple people's houses, and they're all equally as compelling visually. And it has such a different sense of architecture and just conceptually this oasis in the middle of the desert that uses like bright blue skies and towering palm trees and very stark white houses and big windows. Like, there's nothing like this film architecturally, which really supports that color in the visuals and the framing.
No.
Yeah, the bird's eye of the town and its borders is quite visually arresting. I thought that was really nice. I will say that you can notice the CGI when we entered the car chase sequence that ends the movie, but
I don't remember
it's
that.
neither here nor there.
No, the car chase scene that
No.
ends the movie.
The CGI.
But yeah, I mean, I don't really have a lot to add, but like the production design is obviously great, and that's why I say that I don't think that Olivia Wilde did a bad job directing this movie. Maybe it's have a bit of weight being lifted by the cinematography team, the director of photography, people like that. But I don't think that Olivia Wilde did a bad job with the visual language of the film in the slightest. I think she did a great job, quite honestly. But directing her actors is a bit more of and obviously that is the whole drama behind the scenes. Was Olivia Wilde really concerned with directing her actors? Was Florence Pugh sort of thrown out in the deep end to like basically direct herself in these scenes?
Yeah.
Regardless, I kind of side with the Florence Pugh thing because I like to believe that she's able to pull these things out while Olivia Wilde is off snogging with Harry Styles or whatever. Do what you want to do. I don't really mind. But with the behind the scenes drama, it'll be fun to see some sort of expose Netflix docu-series in like 10 to 15 years. I don't know. But regardless, I don't think that Olivia Wilde did a bad job with the visual language. Actors could have been directed better.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I was just
and
thinking
the script is obviously the larger issue, I would say.
Yeah, I think that if I had to point to one thing that kills the movie for me, it's the script.
Yeah.
Because if the film was tighter, I could just say that Harry Styles is hokey and they made a mistake casting him. But it's an issue. It's a compounding issue for me. So that's what this film is. It's a compounding issue.
This was a long one, boys.
It was.
Yeah.
But I think the film deserves that kind of discussion and brings out a lot of interesting points because I do disagree with you guys on a lot of those criticisms, and I don't think
and you're wrong too. No, I'm just kidding, Tucker.
And the review and the recording.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Let
Sorry,
me
continue your
finish.
point. I'm sorry.
Let me just close this out with a little Tucker
Yeah.
Hazel bedtime story. All right,
Okay.
boys.
Me.
Honk shoe me. Put on your sleepy caps and your slippers. But I think that this film, for me, proves that film can be more than just a storytelling medium. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but where this film is great, I think it's some of the best that I've seen all year. And my only problem, sans Harry Styles being weird in some sequences.
Sans Harry Styles?
No!
I'm sorry. I should stop interrupting you. I just can't.
No,
can't.
you
You
needed to.
saying these things.
You needed to. Jesus Christ. Is the script? Is that we don't have that 15 minutes at the beginning? Is that it ends in a weird place? Is that I wish that we did get a little bit more from all these characters? But at the end of the day, while I'm watching this film and being sucked into what Victory is as a place and drinking in those visuals and being enraptured in the sense of repetition of Harry Styles arriving home and her bringing him the glass of whiskey or whatever it is, and the bacon and the eggs and the toast and the coffee in the morning, and strange visuals of her being crushed by the glass and the mirror
iris
thing.
and the blood and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are all great.
These are such inspired choices, and the editing and the sense of place and the sound design, and Florence Pugh just being an absolutely powerhouse performance across all sorts of emotions. Like, I think this movie really does hit home where it needs to, and so much of the runtime, I'm thinking, wow, this movie is great. It doesn't hold up under scrutinization in some departments, but I think it really does in others, and that's why I really hesitate to call this movie a failure. And of course, subjective. You can have your opinion, Abram. I will allow it this once as a treat for you.
Okay.
But
Good.
I really do think this movie is great because I'm not going to remember that. Yeah, the metaverse thing didn't really tie in well. I'm like, no, Florence Pugh is amazing, and I want to put every frame of this movie as a backdrop on my computer. Like, that's really what matters to me. And at the end of the day, that's what this movie did. So it's not one of my favorite of the year, but I think it's just another on the stack of of this movie being great for me for films.
Regardless of whatever you think of this film, and let us know your thoughts in the comments, of course, and join the Discord and let us know there. We can hash it out there if you'd like. But I think we can finally say that we don't have to worry about this film anymore. It's caused a lot of worry for critics, for fans, for the people in the movie, most certainly. But this one's out of the way.
He's got something to say. Look at him.
It's been a long haul, and Abram has something to say before I really.
Tanner, I think you forget that Warner Brothers really needs to worry about this movie.
Oh, do they?
Not necessarily, because it's going to do well.
It's going to do
You
quite
think
well.
it's gonna do well?
Oh,
100%.
absolutely.
Abram-
Sold out theaters across the night for us.
Absolutely. I know.
We'll see.
How full was your theater, by the way? Just by the by.
35% full, maybe.
Okay. Well, we'll see. We'll talk about it on September's episode of Backlot Banter, which will be coming out in early October, so just to give everything a fair run. And we're nearing the end of September, and we got some other releases coming up that we'll talk about very soon, such as Bros, such as Smile, which we're both excited for. Abram's going to be joining us on the Smile review, of course. And
the Blonde review, yeah.
Oh yeah, well, if you thought this one was, full of disagreements and nuances and stuff like that, I'm sure that one will be as well. But regardless, we'll be here for all of those and more. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
I wish he ended the movie by saying Victoria Royale.
Sam said that to me during the movie, and I said, I'm going to break your nose.
V-Bucks. V-Bucks.